Alright guys, so we're going to do things a little bit differently this term because you've only got like 8 weeks, which is about 13 lessons, but you also have camp and you'll probably have sport and there'll probably be, I don't know, like a snow day or a fire day or a unicorn day, so you'll miss a couple of classes. So I'm kind of budgeting this in so we have about 10 lessons and each lesson is going to have one outcome per lesson. So in other words, every lesson will start, we'll have some objectives to do, and we'll finish that lesson and we'll have the thing done. Okay, so that way we won't run out of time. We'll have all these things kind of completed. So it'll kind of make some sense as we go. So I'm also going to make videos that demonstrate what we're doing in each lesson, so you can watch those in advance and save a lot of time when we come into class too. So we'll get started. I'll show you what we're doing. So the first thing we're going to use is we're going to be using a new program to you, bless you. Oh yeah, disclaimer too, so I'm recording this at home, so there might be the odd interruption of Winston and possibly my wife sneezing, so bless you, Justine.
Thank you.
So yeah, there you go, so that's realism for you, alright. Anyway, so we're going to be using Blender, so that'll be new to you, you've probably never used that before. So Blender is a 3D program. The good thing is it's free and it's actually pretty powerful. So when I did this, when I was making games, I use a program called 3D Max, which we'll have a look at as well, which is very similar in how it works. But the good thing with Blender is, yeah, it's really easy. It's a really small program and it runs on, probably run on your watch. So it's pretty good. So that's what we'll be using. And you'll have to forgive me too, because I'm so used to using Max that sometimes I might accidentally press the wrong keys, but I'll let you know. So this is Blender. So it's a 3D modeling program. Okay, so I'll just get in here. And you'll see it's got a lot going on here. And then there's even more if you do stuff like that, and you can move things around. But I'll run you through the basics and I'll run you through what we're doing. And again, I'm going to make it nice and simple so you know exactly what we're working on, and we've got the key little milestones to do. So this first lesson and this first video will just be running you around Blender, showing you some of the things we'll be looking at, and just giving you some examples. So the main thing we'll be looking at is low poly modeling. So a polygon is a square essentially. So we've, in the past we've talked about bitmaps and we've talked about vectors, and now we're going into polygons. So polygons are, 3D boxes. And we're going to be doing low poly modeling. So low poly means low polygon, so a lot less boxes. So to put that in perspective, you've got high poly and low poly modeling. So high poly, you use as many boxes as you want, essentially to make it as detailed as you want, and that's good for like movies and stuff like that. Low poly is you're trying to get as a realistic image as possible using the least amount of boxes, and that's for things like video games essentially, because you're animating and you're moving these characters around. Video game machines aren't super powerful, so they need to be like lower poly so they can actually run in real time. So for an example, I'm going to delve into my past, and I'm going to bring up some stuff that I worked on in video games. So it's for a video game that I made called Nicktoons Unite. Buy it now. And these, well, you won't be able to buy it. It was like a SpongeBob SquarePants and Timmy Turner, and I'm sure some of these characters. So this is low poly modeling. So I'm gonna I'll quickly show you some examples of stuff that I've worked on, and you can have a play with these later, and I'm just going to give you these models to check out yourself as well. So, okay, so here is SpongeBob SquarePants, and so you can see I've got a little animation going on there. And if we kind of zoom around, I'm just going to pivot around there, you can have a look at him. I'll zoom in a bit. You can see it's got bones in there as well, so bones are what make him move. So if I select one of these bones, I'm going to select one there and move the hand, that whole arm will kind of move up as well, and move down. So we're not going to worry about that, or if I push it forward like that, you'll see it move across. So this is an actual game model, but I'll just go into the wireframe here so you can actually have a look at him. I'll just select him. There he is there. So this is low poly. So you can see not many polygons making up this character. Okay, well, I mean, there's still quite a few, but in comparison to, say, a movie, there's not many there, because this was made to run on the PlayStation 2. So I don't know if you remember those. You probably weren't born. But we had limited polys to kind of work with in a PlayStation 2 model. So that's kind of an example there. I'll open up another one. Let's open up Timmy Turner. All right, and here's another example here. So this is Timmy Turner. You can see I've got a little model on his hair there. So if I kind of zoom in, I'll just zoom into this guy, put a wireframe on, and again you can kind of see he's modeled there. So he's pretty low poly, and these are all low poly models, and they're also box modeling, which is what we'll be doing too. So we'll be making these soon. Okay. Again, I'll explain what we're doing over the course of each lesson. So that's Timmy there. If I put that realistic back on again, you can see a bit more of a detailed view. Same deal, if I grab some of these bones in here and move them, it'll actually move that arm, and you can see it moving in there. And there you go. So that's a couple of examples of low poly modeling. I also got some mates of mine to send me some examples of what they're doing on, say, a PlayStation 3, so you can see the difference in quality there. So I'm going to open up another model here. Alright, I'll just import that. Now this is from Final Fantasy 13, which is hard for me to say. Alright, here we go. And now if we zoom in here, now again this is low poly modeling, but we're now using it for a PS3, so you've got a much more powerful machine, so we can have more polygons there. So you can see in her face, we've got a stack more polygons in her face, and actually in her whole body. If we switch this to wireframe, we can see a whole stack more polygons there. Again, because as the machines get more powerful, the more polys that you can use in here. So this is a pretty cool example of, I mean, this is super high poly. You'll also see it. I mean, her face has stacks, because if I unhide, I'm just going to go in here for a sec, and I'm going to show you everything as well. If I zoom this out, you can see the amount of bones that she's got. So I'm just going to go back to shaded. All of these points here are the bones for her face, so that she can talk. She's got about 8 or 9 bones in her face alone, in her mouth, so she can actually, you know, move her mouth. Bones on each strand of hair, stacks of stuff. So this is kind of where we're going now, and as the new machines come out, it'll get even more powerful, so you can do even more on screen. So yeah, it's going to be a PS3 era view there. So let me just get rid of those bones again. There we go. There she is over there. That's your PS3, sorry, your PS3 quality models there. And yeah, it'll only get better. So I was used to using kind of modeling on PlayStation 1, which you definitely probably weren't born for, and PlayStation 2. So I'm kind of used to really, really low poly. This kind of stuff's really cool. So let me just go back to Blender, okay? So back to Blender. So I will show you how we can start actually modeling things like that as well. So here are your menus, okay? So kind of like, you know, Photoshop and Illustrator that we use, everything has menus and everything has a certain spot. They've also got shortcut keys too. So if you press a certain key, it'll do that for you. But what I'm going to do with all these videos is do it the long way, so you can see exactly how to do it as opposed to the shortcut keys. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So we've got, we'll start on the left. So the very, very top here is our file menu. So we can, you know, file, save, open, you know, that's pretty important. Add, that allows us to add in elements. So, you know, we've got cubes and circles and planes and surfaces. And again, I'll explain all of this as we go on to our next lesson. So this lesson is just a real quick introduction. So don't worry if you don't know this kind of stuff yet. Render actually renders your image, so it makes it into a final image. Yeah, there's your window. And here's your object tools. So an object is whenever you put anything into this, so this kind of 3D space here is your scene, okay? And the 3 main things you want to do is right-click will select your object. So I'll just put another object in here, and I'll just move it so I can do this. So if I right-click, I select the object, okay? So you've got to right-click each time. So this is kind of what you've got to get your head around. If I left-click, nothing happens. It just moves this little dot, which is kind of like your, it's like a 3D space. So whenever I rotate, it rotates around that circle. So right click to select, and then once it's selected, left click will do what you have on there. So at the moment I've got these move tools. So if I left click and say I can move across, I can constrain it to the, depending on what axis I want. So that's a Z axis, that's the Y axis, and that's the X axis, and it'll constrain it across that. Or if I select a little white circle, I can move it around. So again, right click to select it, left click to do everything else. So kind of do right click to select and left click is action, I guess you could say. Like that makes things happen. Your next one is your middle click of your middle mouse button. If I click that down, I can rotate around this space in this kind of 3D space. All right. And then finally, if you want to move the space, if you hold shift and select your middle button, it moves that space around. Okay. So that's the three main tools that we'll be using always. Okay. So again, so right click to select your objects, left click to then do something, so the action, so move it or edit it, or we'll get to that soon. Okay, middle click to spin around, and then shift middle click to move the whole plane. Oh, and then scroll wheel, we'll zoom it in. So if I want to zoom in, I want to look at that box, I'll shift middle click, and then I want to rotate around it, so I'll do that, right click to select it. And there you go there. All right, so let's go back. So here are our object tools. So these object tools will change the object. So at the moment here, I've got two objects. I've got two cubes, okay? So they're in object mode, so I can do things like I can translate, which means move. So if I click any of these buttons here, if I don't press anything and move the mouse, it'll actually do that action. And if you want to say, right, that's what I want, then you click the X, okay? So it'll make more sense in something like, if I rotate, you know, I can rotate around there, click the left, all right, now it stays like that. And of course, you've got your controls here to undo. Scale is changing the size of it, you know, bigger, smaller. So again, do that. And for instance, here's a shortcut key. If I hit S, it does it for me as well. Okay. And origin, it basically says where you want the origin of this point to be. So let's not worry about that. Duplicate will do that. It'll make a copy of this object. Delete will delete it. Join will merge two together, which I'll show you later. Shading, we'll show you that later. Keyframes, obviously you can animate in this, but we're not going to worry about that for a while yet. So let's ignore that. And then you've got this thing called a grease pencil. A grease pencil is like a pencil where I can draw on, you can kind of just draw on this, on the screen, essentially. It doesn't do anything, it just stays there. So you can kind of take notes on the screen. You can get rid of those as well. So they're handy if I'm modeling something, for instance, and I'm saying, hey, I want you guys to, you know, have a look at this corner. I can do that. But yeah, it really doesn't do anything but that. So it's pretty handy to have. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so that's your object tools. Then as we go across to the bottom here, this changes your view. So in your view, you can change this kind of perspective. So if I go view front, it shows me the front view. Okay, view back, there's the back view. View left, there's left view. Really handy when you use the keyboard, you just use the actual numbers on the keyboard. So, you know, 1 will go to the front view, 3 will go to the right view, 3 will, and control 3 goes to the left view. So that's really handy. Or you can view everything. So here is all 4 different sides at once. Okay, so that can be quite handy as well, but I'm using a pretty small screen on my Mac here, so I'm just going to use the one screen, which is that one there. Okay, so that's your view. Select, that's how you select whatever you've got on here. So you can select everything. So if I just zoom out, I'll just rotate so you can see. If I go select, deselect all, or select all, it selects everything in my scene. Okay, and you can select certain things. So you can select everything that's the same color, the same layer, the same shape. You can do that as well. But again, the main ones from there are going to be, so you've got circular select and border select. So border select is probably the best one, where you actually make a border, like a square, and whatever you select in there, it selects, okay? And that's super handy when you start dealing with lots of different items on the screen at once, instead of doing this one select every time. Now, if you wanted to manually select a few things, if I select one here, hold shift, and then select another one, then I can do that too. Okay, so that's your select. And then your object, that allows you to change things to your object, okay? You can mirror it, you can transform it again. So there's another whole section there, which we don't need to worry about. So I'm just going to limit us to the stuff that we're going to use for each video. So like I said, each lesson will be achieving a small kind of outcome, and I'll only talk about the tools that we need to achieve that outcome, so you don't get overloaded with all of these. And then if it's so, you'll pick them up as we go along. Okay, so finally you've got this one here. So you've got object mode and edit mode. They're the main two we'll be looking at. So object mode will do that. It just selects the whole object. You can't do much with it. You can move it around, you can animate it, but that's all. Edit mode is when you start to create stuff, which we'll look at soon. So in edit mode, you can now play around and edit this thing. So if I go into, that one there, so that's vertices. So I'll explain those in 1 second. So there, now I can actually start editing this box and doing a lot of stuff to it, which I'll show you later. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. So that's your edit mode. So object mode lets you move your object as a whole, animate it, do whatever you want with it. Edit mode down here edits that. Okay, and again, you'll see a few other ones here which we're not going to worry about. Finally, you've got this one here, which is your view. So it's how you view this screen. So I've got it as shaded. I can have it as wireframe, and I can only see the wireframe options. I can have it as texture. So if I had a texture on there, I'd actually see that. Or I can have it as rendered, and that'll actually show me what it looks like if I'm going to render it. But that takes a lot longer, obviously, because it's got to re-render the scene every time. So we're just going to have it on wireframe. And there's your wireframe there. And then I'll zoom in. All right, actually, I might just put it back to solid. So, all right, here is your selection tools. Okay, so again, if I click on that one, I'm just going to go back to object. If I click on that one, I've got my move, up, down, left, right, or with the white, you can move it all that way. Rotate. So if I hit the red, it rotates on the red axis. If I hit the Y, it'll rotate on the Y axis. Blue, Z, it'll rotate on the Z axis. Okay, and then that just shows you little pivot points. So they're the main two there. This changes where it rotates, but we don't have to worry about that. And then finally, you've got layers, which we're not going to worry about as well. So let me go back to edit mode, because that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time. So here's edit mode. So 3D modeling is made up of 3 different things, different parts. So here's a polygon, and it's made up of this one here called a vertex or a vertice, which is this dot. So if I select one of those and move it, okay, it's made up of vertices. You've got edges, which are the edges, obviously, of those, and then you've got faces, which is that one there, and that's how you make a polygon. So all polygons need to have at least 3 vertices to make a face. Okay, if that makes any sense. So you can have 4, you can have 5, but you at least need to have 3 so it can make this face on top of it. So again, let's go to vertices. So to move these, again, I'm right-clicking to select it, left-clicking it to do something with it. Right-click, left-click, right-click, left-click, and moving that around. All right, same with my edges. And I can move that, and then of course I can kind of rotate and see what I'm doing as well. So vertices, edges, faces, and they're in our edit mode. All right, and that is that menu. And then finally, we'll go to this one over here. This is kind of our whole scene here. So again, if you kind of move these pluses out, it shows you what's going on. So I can move that back in because we don't need that. So here's our scene. Now in our scene, so this is made of layers again. So you can see we've got our render layer, we've got our world, we've got a camera in there, we've got our cubes in there, 1 and 2, which are those 2 there, and we've got a lamp, which is our light. Okay, so in 3D modeling, it's kind of like real world stuff. Like you have to have a camera, you have to have lights, and that's how you make your scene. And here's, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. Down here are our kind of, think of these as different parts of this object. So there's our scene, okay, and then we've got materials, all right, there's our cube, so we can have our location, our size. We've then got this thing where we link it. Our modifiers, which are really important, we'll talk about modifiers in a later lesson, okay? They modify the object and they're non-destructive. So if I put one of these things on, it doesn't change my model, but we'll talk about that later. There's the object. Again, here's our materials. So everything, you can put a material on there, like a texture on there. This is where we make the new textures. Then we've got some special effects and we've got physics and stuff like that as well. So again, I'm going over this pretty quickly because we'll touch on these individually when we look at our lessons as we go across. But yeah, so that's your panels. So I'm just going to move that back. And down here is your animation panel, which we're not going to talk about just yet, but when we do animation, it's down there. So that is your real quick intro into Blender, all right? And so what we're going to do this lesson is pretty simple. All I want you to do is play around with Blender, okay? Play around with these things up here, have a look at what goes on here. Look, you can destroy stuff, it's fine. All right, start adding some meshes and see what you can do. So if you go into Add, Mesh, we can chuck in a cube, or Add, Mesh, I'm going to chuck in a circle. I'm just going to keep throwing these things in here. So I can say I've just got a circle there, or Add, Mesh, I'm going to do a sphere, and we've got our sphere over here. So you can see there's our sphere. And then right click, move. So I just really want you to get your head around this whole right click, select, move. All right, we're not even going to worry about building stuff just yet. I mean, this is all here. Again, so add, mesh, you've got stacks of different things. You've got a monkey. So we can add a monkey's head. There's a monkey. That's just in there by default because Blender's like icon kind of logo thing. It's a monkey, so there's a little monkey you can play with. Anyway, lots of stuff you can put in here. So just go to your meshes because that's what we're going to be working with. If you want to play with cameras and lamps and all that kind of stuff, you can, but we're not going to talk about that just yet. So just add in a whole bunch of shapes, move them in, move these around, kind of just get used to controlling this left click, right click, which is a little bit tricky to get your head around. So how it's designed is you've got your mouse in your right hand to do all this, and then your left hand's free to do all the shortcut keys and make it quicker for you. So that's all that we're doing today, is just playing around with this. And finally, I've made, because we were talking about games and polygons and all that kind of stuff, what I've made is, whoops, I'm just going to open it up here, an example. So what we have here is 3 different generations of characters from 3 different generations of low poly machines. So we're starting with this one here. So if I switch this to a wireframe, there we go. This is from a PlayStation. This is Final Fantasy models. This is from PlayStation 1. So you can see very, very few polygons. They just started making 3D games back then. This is 97. That's a long time ago. None of you would have been born. So you can see this kind of low, very, very low poly here. Okay, they kind of didn't really know what they were doing. It was new. Their machines were pretty slow. And so that's kind of the best they could come up with. Then we've got over here, we're going into PlayStation 2 phase. So you can see a lot more polys now. They're getting a lot better at making these models. If I select her face, zoom in a bit. All right, you can see we've got a lot more. I'll just put this back to solid. A lot more detail in the faces here as well, okay? The bodies were still kind of fairly low poly, but a huge jump. And then as we go into PlayStation 3 era, you're looking at this one over here. Again, another big jump in not only polygons now, but also bones and animation and all that kind of stuff. So they're really stepping up. So you've got this model here, so I'm going to let you play with this one. And again, you can just destroy it, edit it, go into edit mode, see what you can do with this thing, just wreck it. And the whole point is you're just kind of playing around with Blender. That's all you're doing this lesson, okay? Next lesson, as a sneak peek into next lesson, we'll be looking at the object and the edit mode and actually modeling something in 3D, okay? Something kind of fairly basic to begin with. So I'll show you one I was making earlier. There we go there. So I'm sure that looks familiar to you. That's obviously the Braemar logo. Is it a logo? Emblem? Is it Emblem? There we go. But there it is there. So that's the Braemar emblem, which I made from, there's the actual example there. And I'll get rid of that again. Yeah, the Braemar emblem that I've made in 3D in low poly using box modeling, which is what we'll be starting doing next lesson. Okay, so there you go. There's a sneak peek. But that's it. So yeah, this lesson, let me just do a quick recap. So what we looked at, I'm going to close Blender down. We looked at Blender, which is this, okay? We looked at running around the kind of the menu here and how it works. We looked at these tools, okay, on the left and the bottom and the right. But the main things we learned was kind of how to control this environment. So right click to select. I'm going to add another mesh in here. I'm going to add a monkey and move him there. So right click to select, left click to action that. Okay, so right click, left click, okay. That's what we kind of learnt. Middle click to spin around, scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and shift to move up and down, left and right in those planes. So that's kind of the main thing that we learned. Okay, once you got your head around controlling this, it'll make it a lot easier for the next lessons. And then we also looked at object mode, which is these here, and edit mode, which allows us to edit these. So again, if I right click to select it, left click to edit it. So I'm going to go into object mode, select my monkey. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, go into edit mode, there we go, and you can see I can start to edit this guy around. So he's already built with box modeling, low poly box modeling, which you'll be able to do. You'll be able to do this very soon. You'll be able to make something like this. But again, right click, select something. I can move it, do that. So I'm selecting the vertices because we looked at the vertices. We looked at edges, okay, and we looked at faces. So there's a face there. All right, so like I said, if I can show you, right, if I delete a vertice, just for fun, if I go in there and X for delete, and I delete that vertice. Bless you. You can see I've just exploded the monkey's head. Bless you. Because you need to have at least those 3 vertices to make a polygon. So we'll come back to that in a later lesson. But that's the basics of Blender. So again, yeah, have fun today and just play around with those. The model, that Final Fantasy model, will be on the server, so you can play around with that and you can destroy those, and you can kind of see that progression from when I was little to when I'm old now. So you can have a play with that as well. And yeah, that's it for this lesson. And of course, you saw next lesson we'll be starting to model stuff. So the outcome or the goal of this lesson is just to play with Blender and to play with these tools and get your head around it. That's today's outcome. That's all we need to do. So you need to hit that. That's it. All right. Bye.